Now I'm pressing Control 0 again, and I'm going back up to show all 4 of my images. I am going to take my brown case PSD and close it, and I'm not going to save it. I am taking the Move tool. You can either press V or just click on the Move tool, and I'm taking my flower and I'm drag and dropping it over to the sky image, and then I'm closing the flower image and not saving it. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is just make sure that I have the tab for sky.jpg selected, and then I'm going back up to Arrange Documents and clicking on the Consolidate All button. Move the mask panel and the layer panel if necessary, and I'm just going to pull up this flower a little bit. Now I have the flower layer selected, and I'm going to double click on the name and name it flower. I'm going to double click on layer 1 and call it suitcase, because you want to get in the habit of naming your layers. Absolutely. Now I am shift clicking on the flower layer so that I have both the suitcase and the flower layer active, and I'm just taking my Move tool and pulling these both down to be within the image area. I'm clicking just on the flower now. Now let's say that I want the flower to look like it's kind of peeking out of the pocket of this suitcase. So right now you'll see that it's kind of hanging in front. What if I want it to appear right about here? Well, this is when you can take advantage of masks as well. I'll show you a couple ways that you can work with selections to do neat composites. I'm clicking on the suitcase and I'm turning off the flower. And I'm just going to do a really quick selection for this method. I'm going to take the front part of the suitcase. And you can see, okay, it's not exactly straight. Not a problem. That's the image area is not exactly straight. Don't forget that you have select transform selection. If I get outside that corner, I can kind of rotate this so that it's on the same angle as the suitcase. Yeah, that looks about good. I'm going to confirm that's my transform. I'm going to, with my selection, press Control J. Now think of jump. You can also access this by choosing Layer, New, Layer via Copy. But Control J or Command J is so much easier. Just think of jump. And I'll tell you why you use this command. It takes what you've selected and it puts just what you had selected on a new layer. It puts a copy of just that selected item. So if you're trying to create a ribbon wrapping around something or putting wheat in front of a barn, you can make little selections and just copy little blades of grass or ribbons and pull them in a separate layer and then arrange your composite so that that item you just copied to a new layer is actually in front. And you'll see that now it looks like this flower is actually sitting inside of the suitcase. Now, of course, I can do some additional items. When you're making changes to the image, you always want to be careful and make sure you're covering yourself in case you make an error or a mistake. So in this case, I'm clicking on the flower layer, just creating a new blank layer, because I want to go in with a really, really light brush. So I'm taking my brush tool, maybe an 17%, making my brush a little bit larger by hitting that right bracket, pressing Shift to left bracket to make sure it's softer. And notice that this new layer I put in is behind that front of the suitcase, so that if I start painting a little bit of a shadow on these leaves and giving it some dimension, that it's not actually painting over the suitcase. Now I told you I was going to do 2 different methods for this. Let me just turn this suitcase off just to show you another method. I'm going to use a different selection tool this time. I'm going to choose the Polygon Lasso tool and just click on this side of the suitcase and come over to the other side and click. And you'll notice that this works a little bit like the pen tool, if you're familiar with that, where I can click from one point to another. And when I close it, now if it doesn't close, double click, I get a selection with straight edges. Now I'm selecting the suitcase layer and I'm duplicating it by dragging it down to the dog-eared document. Now if you're real fanatical about naming your layers correctly, hold down your Alt or your Option key as you drag it down, and we'll call this top suitcase and click OK. Now I have this layer active and I have my selection active, and then I add a layer mask, and then I'll sandwich this in between the flower. Now why'd I do this? Oh, let me pull my shadow down. Why do I do this? Because I now have a mask. So if I need to extend, perhaps somebody comes to me and says, can you make it look like it's in this pocket in the back? I can take my brush tool, I can click on that layer, I can make sure that I'm at 100% opacity, drag this up, and then I can just say, sure, you know what? I'll go ahead and do that. Press X. I don't need all that craziness going on. Oops, went a little too far. That's okay. Press X. Maybe solidify that a little bit. Get a harder brush. Yes, that's what we need. Shift right bracket. Smaller. Press X. Bring this back in. Click on that mask. Paint with white and press X, and I can bring back some of those details. Went a little too far. Press X. Paint back some of the area that I didn't mean to get. So the point of this being that as I am working on my composite, I can quickly go in and make changes frequently without ever destroying my image. So I've made a lot of selections here. The first one I intentionally made using the magic eraser so that you could see how you could use matting. The additional selections I made were made with masks, and the reason they were made with masks were so that you could see how you could continually go back and edit your composite over and over again in the selections that you've made. So notice that if I shift click on these images, that they're all intact. Everything is there, the entire suitcase, the entire flower, the background in its entirety except where I cropped it out. So let me just shift click on these again, bring back our composite, and hopefully that helps you with some of your background removal questions. We'll get into some more advanced removal of background when we get into the vector tool later.